I own a couple dozen books on wild edible plants, and I wanted to narrow them down to just the five of them that I believe would be the most valuable for you to have in your library in case you ever needed it. Now, the big mistake a lot of people make when they realize they need some reference material on wild edible foods is they'll get a survival type book, and that'll usually have a chapter section in it on that specifically. Now, here's the problem with those. I want to show you an example. Dandelions has one little paragraph on it, right? Now I want to compare that to the first book on the list here. Dandelion has its own chapter that goes from page 269 to 297. So that's what, 28 pages? I mean, think of the difference in quality of information you're going to get between one paragraph and 28 pages. Or a lot of them will just have bad pictures or line drawings or something that are just not helpful for you to identify the plant you're looking for. And it might just show the plant in its perfect adult form. Well, you don't always find plants in their perfect adult form. A little bit better option people will go with will be a field guide, which is usually a gigantic book that will have like 700 different plants in it. Now that's cool, but the problem is they'll have usually just one page of information and don't really go super in depth about what to do once you found the plant and collected it, how to prepare it or anything. It's just basically an identification book. So don't totally discount these field guides just yet. I'm going to get into them in a minute. But first, I want to show you the first two books I would go with, absolutely, if you have the money for them, is Edible Wild Plants, Volume 1 and 2 by author John Kallis. These go super in depth into each plant. Sure, they may only have a dozen plants in each one, unlike the field guide, which has hundreds, but it's going to go in the super detail about each one. And one thing I do like is that the plants are divided up between foundation plants, tart, pungent, and bitter. Because a lot of people will, try dandelion for the first time and they'll bite into it. They've heard it's edible and it's just ultra bitter and they say, ugh, that's disgusting. Why would anybody want to eat something like that? And is it any surprise that if that's somebody's first experience with wild edible foods, why they would never want to try it again? So John Kallis breaks it down. So the foundation plants would be plants that have a mild flavor, which most people could accept and tolerate. And then the other stronger flavors can be mixed in with the foundation ones as needed, just to spice up the batch a little bit and make it much, not only just to feed you, but to actually make it much more palatable and enjoyable for you. So in each chapter, as you can already see here, beautiful pictures. You have a range map, and then also like a tiny seedling. So not just the beautiful adult picture you saw on the first page, but you'll also have at different stages of life. In-depth showing different types. There'll be lookalikes, up close views of what you're looking for to help you identify the plant, the different types of flowering stages. The heart, then he gets down into then how to prepare it, seed heads. So harvesting them, how to do it, managing the bitterness, cooking the leaves. You can see a little recipe. He has actual recipes in here that you can use. Doesn't that just look delicious? Sauteing them, steaming them, raw, boiled, sauteed. Just all the different ways you can do this. And that's just for dandelions there. So these two are at my absolute number 1 and 2 most important. If that's all you can afford is 2 wild food books, go for these. Edible Wild Plants Volume 1 and 2 by John Callis. Now he says that he's going to be releasing a 3rd volume. The difference between these 2 books was about 13 years release date, and the second one was just released in 2023. So how long will it be before the 3rd one comes out? I don't know. But if you're watching this in the future, check to see if there's a 3rd volume. I would grab that too right along with it. The next 3 are from an author named Samuel Thayer. His books are just as good as the John Callis ones. They have a little bit more plants per book and a little less information in each one. I queued up the dandelion section again. So again, great pictures. Lots of, instead of just that 1 paragraph description, you actually get a good amount of stuff on harvest and preparation. Good quality pictures, you know, good stuff. Even when they look like when they're roasted. So yeah, these would be the next 3 then. Would be Samuel Thayer's books. The Forager's Harvest, Nature's Garden, and Incredible Wild Edibles. Now, when you're searching for Samuel Thayer's book, you will find he has a field guide out, which came out, I believe, this year. I said, you know, field guides are limited in how much information they give, but I would say as a bonus, after the 5, if you still wanted to go a little further and grab something with just a ton of stuff in it to help you identify various plants in your area, find you a good field guide. This one is designed for, you can see the basically North America east of the Rockies, but there's field guides for just about any region. I've seen them for California and the desert Southwest, ones for the Pacific Northwest, Florida, all over. Every region of the world has its own field guides to edible wild plants. So check this out. This one is one of the best field guides I've ever seen of any type. So if you live in that region, this is the one I would recommend as your 6th book to check out. So yeah, I just basically wanted to show you guys the top 5 that I believe are the best to go with of all the books I have on this subject. You know, the survival books, they have their place, but in a real survival situation, I mean, the chapters on wild edibles, you might as well just rip them out and wipe your butt with them. They're just useless. Where you go much more in depth in this type of book and get the real type of information. You know, even in the survival books, I've seen where one of them will write an error and then other survival books will reprint that same error. So that tells me these guys don't even actually eat this stuff. They just copy it from someone else's information. Whereas John Callis and Samuel Thayer, actually, this is part of their daily lives, eating wild edible foods. It's their diet. So these are the guys I would stick to and look for that life or death kind of information. it's important with this type of book that you just don't buy them and then throw them on the bookshelf or in your bug out bag or whatever and just never read them, because plant identification really takes a long time to learn. It is a skill that requires a lot of practice. So if you just wait till society collapses on the first day of the stuff hitting the fan, you decide to bust out one of these books, you're probably going to starve to death before you're able to identify enough plants to even feed yourself. So what I would do is each of these books have introductory chapters that are just general about eating edible wild foods. So I would get the books and then at least read through those beginning chapters of each one, learn what you can from them, and then start. I know it's so many plants, it's overwhelming, but if you can just say pick one plant a month and just try to learn something about that one, like dandelions. We can all recognize what a dandelion is. Start with that. Go through, okay, how can I start preparing this? How can I start incorporating this into my meals? You know, that was one of them I looked into was pokeweed, because back in Illinois, I had tons of it growing in my yard. It grew in my parents' yard. It was just everywhere up there. So I learned a little bit about it, and it's interesting because raw, the entire plant is actually toxic. But under certain conditions, if you collect the rapidly growing shoots and leaves, they can be cooked up and made non-toxic and edible. There's actually in the southeast pokeweed festivals where they have. So it's a good food. You just got to understand how to do it. Because is pokeweed poisonous or is it edible? Yes, it's both. It just depends on what stage it's in, and you got to know how to do it from these books. So just start with one like that. Now I know that the rapidly growing shoots can be cooked up and used in the same way that, say, asparagus stalks are. And the leaves can be cooked up and then used in the same way that spinach leaves are. Obviously, the taste is going to be slightly different, but they can be prepared pretty much the same way. So you can start incorporating these wild plants into your daily diet.